Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 34, and we are excited to be talking with Amazing Tales creator Martin Lloyd. Amazing Tales is a world-renowned children's role-playing game that has sparked the imagination of an entire generation of kids everywhere. Martin, as I was talking before we went on the air, big fan of the book. My 6-year-old daughter loves playing it. She made a character called Bianca. She doesn't know what this character is, but we do know that she is good at flying, jumping, and climbing. So, so there you go. So Martin, as we got a lot of things to talk about, and we talk about some of your new projects you have on the horizon, and before we jump into it, do you want to first kind of give a little bit of a background to the folks that are listening, and also they'll be watching this, to give people how you got into developing this game and how you got into game design in general?
Sure. So first, it's great to be here, and hoping everyone's going to enjoy this. So how did I get started? Well, let's see. So it would have been 7 years ago now. It was a rainy day. I was sat at home looking after my daughter, and we needed something to do. So I made up a little role-playing game to play with her. A friend of mine I knew had done something similar for his daughter, and I thought, well, I can do that too. Just sounds like fun. And it went well. She loved it. And so we kept playing that, and a couple of years later, I guess, I was lucky enough to be able to take a paid sabbatical from my job, with the proviso that, you don't just sit on the sofa, you do something useful with that time, go and learn a language or take a course or something like that. So I said, well, I have this game that I play with my daughter, and I think I'm going to turn it into a book. So that was my kind of project for my sabbatical. And initially, I wasn't sure if it was going to be a book, or if it was just going to be a PDF, or if it was going to be kind of something like Lady Blackbird, where you've got kind of one piece of art and 4 pages, and it's still a great game. But I set out to do that, and I started writing. I started looking around for an artist, and I was lucky enough to find that one of my prior colleagues was setting out as an illustrator for herself. She was happy to do the project. I was happy to work with her, and that kind of created the opportunity to turn Amazing Tales into a full book with loads of pictures, loads of illustrations, and then, thanks to the magic of print-on-demand publishing and drive-through RPG and that kind of stuff, got it out the door, and was delighted to discover that it sold pretty well, and sufficiently well that I decided to try and do a print run, and approached a couple of distributors about would they like to have it, and Studio 2 said yes. So suddenly I had, a print run and a distributor and online sales going on, and I'm lucky enough that sort of my wife and I are pretty financially secure, so we were able to sit down and say, you know what, I think I would like to take a crack at doing this. So I will stay home, look after the kids, and try and turn Amazing Tales into something a bit bigger. That's been working out for us. That's the potted history of it in a nutshell. Lots and lots of good luck, I think, basically.
A part of it, as you said, so you had this all written out during your sabbatical, and you were able to find and what I love about this too is that you basically have the same illustrator for all of for the main book, and also for all of your I guess expansion books that you've kind of put together too, correct?
No, that's not true.
Okay.
Iris did everything for the main book and the first expansion.
Oh, okay.
But then she basically became very successful and went off to do more stuff, and her timelines and my timelines no longer lined up. So since then, I've been working with a Brazilian artist called Ayu Marquez, who has been doing the subsequent stuff.
Okay.
It's a little bit different, but it's got that same kind of sense of childish adventure to it. That's
Right.
kind of what makes Amazing Tales work visually. Yeah.
And so you actually had, and so with that together, and let's talk a bit about you have a lot of products that are on Drive-Thru RPG right now, and you also, I remember hearing you in a previous interview talked about these 21
Yeah.
21 one-page
Things to do in lockdown.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So lockdown started, and we have an Amazing Tales Facebook group where people can come and talk about the game and share stuff they've been doing. And somebody posted just a little 2-page PDF and said, "Hey, I played this game with my kids yesterday and I really liked it, so I've written it up for you guys." And it involved a well-known friendly equestrian franchise. So I said, kind of, well, that looks brilliant. I can't do anything with it, but I really like the sort of format. I thought, well, maybe I can write one myself. So I sort of put together a template and wrote a 1-page adventure, and that went quite well. I thought, okay, I'll do another one and another one, and it seemed like people liked them. I was putting them out, and they were getting all of them a few hundred downloads on their first day. And so I set myself a target of doing one adventure for every piece of character art in the core Amazing Tales book, which meant 21 adventures. I didn't tell anyone that was the target because I am not by nature a completer finisher. But I stuck to it. So every weekday I got one out of the door and kind of plundered various different things for inspiration. So there is a kind of disaster movie one. There's a alien one. There's a sort of sword and sorcery Conan style one. All these kind of things, but all kid friendly. And yeah, I had a lot of fun writing them. There's a procedurally generated dungeon one. Yeah, and they proved really, really popular. And I got some lovely feedback from people saying, this had helped give them something to do while they were stuck in the house with their kids. And then it all kind of got bundled up and put into one big PDF. Initially, that was for a project called, what was it called? Play Safe or something like that. That was a group of people who publish RPGs for kids, put together a collection, a bundle for sort of fundraising for COVID-related purposes, and that went out. And then just as that was winding up, the whole Black Lives Matter thing kicked off. So I kind of rolled the compilation into the Black Lives Matter bundle, and then since then it's been available as a charity compilation with a different charity getting the monies every month.
And did you feel as though that were you, I guess I would say, surprised, or I mean, you kind of mentioned before that it was a delight to see that it kind of took off. Did you know that this was a niche that needed to be filled with this new generation of parents who kind of grew up on Dungeons and Dragons at home, or was?
Yeah, I kind of hoped so. I mentioned I did this during my sabbatical, and just before I started the sabbatical, I'd done a course on product design and some design methodologies. So I decided to do it properly, and I did go out into the community and talk to lots of people who already played role-playing games with their kids. And I kind of found two camps, if you like. One was the people who really want to play Dungeons and Dragons with their kids. They don't want to play anything else. They want to play Dungeons and Dragons with their kids. And some of them have realized that Dungeons and Dragons is a bit much for 4-year-olds. And the game that those guys play is Hero Quest. If you want moving around on a grid, if you want fighting lots of different monsters, if you want hit points and all that kind of stuff, Hero Kids is the game for you, and it does it very well. And then there were the other people who wanted to play role-playing games with their kids and wanted to explore all the different kinds of things that role-playing games can do. And there didn't seem to be so much catering for those guys. So I was hoping that, if I could write something flexible and story-driven that was really let you do all kinds of different things, that would be the sweet spot for them. And it turned out to work.
Mm.
So yeah, I didn't know there was an audience, or I knew there was an audience, but I didn't know how big it was. So it could have been 5 people. It turned out not to be.
So do you know? So this is, and I don't even know if there's an answer to this, but is good storytelling, not good storytelling, but like, imaginative storytelling and rules, are those two mutually exclusive of each other? Like, can you have a lot of rules and still be able to tell giant stories that allow the imagination?
Yeah, you can. It's I think it's about thinking quite hard about what kind of storytelling you want your game to facilitate. So one game some friends of mine wrote, which I'm a big fan of, is an indie game called Lovecraft-esque, which is about creating your own Lovecraft story. And with the premise that Lovecraft stories were, horrific stories where the monsters were unique and you'd never seen them before. So that's not what you get in a game of Call of Cthulhu, where, somebody has kind of gray, slimy skin and everyone knows it's a Deep Ones scenario coming up. This was about kind of, let's create something that's genuinely weird and unusual every time we play. And so Lovecraft-esque works on this structure where you have 3 or 4 players, but no GM, and 1 character. And each sort of round of play, if you like, somebody will introduce a clue into the narrative as to what's going on. And at the end of each round, everybody writes down for themselves what they think is happening. So it's called jumping to conclusions. So, and then just before you do the finale of the game, you kind of all take out your bits of paper and pitch what you think is going on. And then the most horrific one or the most interesting one for the table is the one that you follow up. So Lovecraft-esque is pretty heavy, in terms of rule structure. There's a very tight structure on the game. There's very clear things that everybody is supposed to be doing every moment, but it produces these amazing stories. So that's a pretty sort of strict example of a game that leads you in a particular style of storytelling, but also something a bit more traditional like Feng Shui, which is a game that's set up around its concept of, we're going to make our own action movie, and that means action movie physics apply. So all the skills and all the rules and everything that happens leads you towards this sort of action movie approach to the way things are going. You wouldn't want to use it for a grim and gritty dungeon crawl. It's just not going to do it, that rule set. But if you want to make something like Die Hard or The Matrix or something like that, it can do it, and it does it very well. So no, it's not that rules don't support storytelling, but I think if you want your rules to support storytelling, then either they need to really keep themselves out of the way, which is what happens in Amazing Tales, or you need to have a really strong idea about what kind of story you want and then build a game that supports that.
Okay.
I suspect.
So you don't want to make you don't want Martin Lloyd of Amazing Tales to make this definitive statement saying more rules equal less creativity then?
Oh, will more people, will we be notorious if I say that? Should I say that? Let's have a big Twitter storm. Rules are bad for creativity. I said it. Fight me.
I guess. Well, it's funny because before we got on the air, we're talking about this Sir Ken Robinson, an education doctor in education and stuff. He was talking about one of the things we're talking about is divergent thinking and how when people take the divergent thinking test, 98% that people that test at genius level, at 98% of the people that test at genius level are kindergartners. And going to show, as we were talking earlier, that we are taught to not be imaginative as we grow older. And do you see some of the questions that you're seeing and some of the feedback and the forums that you're a part of or that you've created? How much of a unconscious bias or pushback do you get from adults who are saying, put this rule in, put this rule in, put this rule in?
A little bit, I think, but it tends to go away if they've played the game. That's the odd thing. You know, there is this weird thing of people critiquing role-playing games that they haven't played. And I think you have to play a game if you're going to really have an opinion on it. I think you can look at the rules, but until you've actually tried to use them the way the designer intended, it's quite hard to really critique something. But no, people seem to get that pretty quickly, that kind of you can do whatever you want, and that the character generation system really pushes you towards that approach. But there are people who keep trying to put things in because they assume that games need them. So hit points is my bête noire. Some people just feel it's not a role-playing game if it hasn't got hit points. And the other one is that the games master should roll dice. So the games master in Amazing Tales never rolls dice. And some people just like rolling dice for the monsters. So fine. You know, once the game is out of my hands, it's your game. So do what you like with it. But I would encourage you to at least play it once without hit points and the GM rolling dice.
Well, it was so. Talk to us a bit. Also for those that are listening, is just real quick. What's the character you have? How's the character creation work on this for someone who just gets the book and they want to sit down and just play it with their 5-year-old or their 10-year-old or their 15-year-old?
Yeah. So you grab your small child and you ask them what kind of story they want to make up. And hopefully they give you an answer you can work with. And then you ask them what kind of hero they think they want to be in that story. And they might say a superhero, or they might say a fairy or a princess or a pirate. Or they might say a giant robot dinosaur with arms and 4 arms. So there's an example of that in the book. Or a friend of mine whose son came home from school and said, Daddy, I want to play a game. We have to play Amazing Tales. Can we all be different viruses? Because that's what he'd been learning about at school. And then the game supports that. So to make a character, you just need to come up with 4 things that character might do. So, you know, your giant dinosaur might be very good at chomping things in half. He might be very good at being really noisy. He might be able to fly. In the case of the one my son came up with, he might also be super stealthy. There you go. And then you're basically done. You assign a different dice to each of those skills, a D12, a D10, a D8, and a D6, based on how good, or the biggest dice going to the most favored skill. And that's it. You're done. And that works really well. And what I've loved hearing is what people have done with the different skills. So, in the book, you get fairly straightforward ones, kind of swashbuckling or running really fast or being able to talk to animals or whatever it is. But some people started taking skills like, having an army of spaceships. I've commander of a fleet of spaceships as a skill. It's like, brilliant. All right, you've got a fleet of spaceships now, and that is fine in the game. The game handles it just fine. Or being a princess was one of my favorite ones. Someone sent me a character sheet their daughter had come up with. So she's a big fan of the Clone Wars. So we've got flying starships, we've got shooting a blaster, we've got being a princess, and we've got I can't remember what the other one was. Maybe fighting with lightsabers, probably. But I just love that kind of being a princess skill. It's so useful. You could do so much with it. The evil tyrant tries to intimidate you. Well, I'm not intimidated. I'm going to be a princess at him. That kind of thing. It's
and so you have, and as you're saying, you have and you do have rules on there as alternative rules for 6-sided die, but basically the core game is that you should have a 12, a 10, an 8, and a 6-sided die, correct?
Yeah, and that's basically because kids like rolling multi-sided dice.
Right.
It's I don't encourage anyone to think too hard about the probabilities in the game, because I didn't. Kids like rolling dice.
And it's like, if it's like anything a 2 or a 1 is a failure.
Yeah.
On
So
any of those dice.
So a 3 or more is a success. And I think between that and the character creation bit, we've now explained the entire rules of Amazing Tales.
That's it, right there. Yeah.
Yeah. Find out what the other 96 pages by buying the book.
Yeah, and also, do you feel as though that probably the biggest part about the restriction on this is probably the parent keeping up with the ideas with the kid?
It certainly can be, I think, and this is one I've talked about this before, but it's something I lucked into with this game, is that most of the games parents play with kids are very boring for the parent. And however much you love your child, you do not want to play the 50th game of Snakes and Ladders. And this is great because it sort of evens out that cognitive load. So the parents have to think pretty hard and work pretty hard to stay, to keep pace with an active child who is pushing all the buttons in their adventure. And the kids, role-playing is an effort for kids. A 4-year-old can keep it going for about 20 minutes, half an hour, and then they get distracted and tired. But for everyone who's doing it, it's an activity that you do together that both of you have to work at, and you get something really good out of. And that seems to work really well for people, that you're doing it together, you both enjoy it in a way that kind of playing with your kids is not always enjoyable. So,
and what do you feel as though is some of the I guess it's because this is basically catering to almost in a way 2 separate audiences. It's because it's parents who grew up on role-playing games, and it's parents who've never even played a role-playing game before. Where do you see you get the most questions from? Which audience do you seem to get the most engagement and questions from?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I would guess probably 90% of my customers have played role-playing games before, I think. So thinking about it, they probably don't ask 90% of the questions. So yeah, it's on a kind of per capita basis. people who haven't played before probably ask slightly more questions, but not very many more, I think. And the role players experienced role players tend to ask very different questions, though. They tend to ask, where are the hit points, and where's the experience system, and that kind of thing.
But and also too, like even like new parent who played, when you hear the word game, there is an assumption there's winning involved. So is there a way of there and some level of education where you can say, well, you can't win. The winning is just playing it. I mean, how do you have these? You're almost doing these like brand new. You're bringing people into this genre of people who've never even put their foot in this type of water before. So,
yeah, I did work quite hard to make all the introductory text, as clear as possible in terms of this is what you're going to be doing. And framing it as you're making up a story together, that seems to really work. Everyone understands you don't win a story. And everyone kind of understands that if you're making it up, then you start without one and you finish with one. So, so I think that kind of framing seems to have worked for people. Talking about it in that way, and perhaps as something you might do instead of a bedtime story, I think that's really helped locate it for people as kind of, okay, this is what we're going to be doing.
Yeah, because yeah, you're right. Because parents can identify with telling a bedtime story. Like this is like telling a bedtime story with dice.
Yeah.
So it's an interactive way to do that. Yeah. And do you see also is so when so you once you put this book now, as you said, this book's about 7 years old now.
No, the game's about 7 years old. The book has
Okay.
been out three and a half years, something like that.
Okay.
Um,
Um,
I should
so
check.
so we have some people that listen that are working on their own games, and they would be talking about say, Martin, I am working on this game. How how the heck did you get it published, or how did you play test this? How did you do all these things? Because you might have some people who are looking at something more story driven, or people that maybe have like more of a rules heavy game. What would be your advice to people that are listening that would want to know how to get their game on shelves as well?
Yeah, so there's it sounds obvious, but there's two parts to this process. One is writing the game, the other is getting it out there. Um, Play testing is very important. I was lucky. My play testers are members of my family. They're captive, and you know they're a bit older now, but at the time they couldn't say no. So um, so it was thoroughly play tested. But I did make a point of actually trying to play it with some other people's kids as well, prior to kind of putting it out there as a thing. But do playtesting. I've been working with a friend of mine to playtest his forthcoming game, and that's a much more meaty, grown-up kind of system. And it's been an education for everyone involved, just kind of sitting down at the end of a session and going, okay, what worked? Why did it work? What will we do differently? Okay, what was down to us as players, and what was down to the rules? That's quite a big thing in playtesting role-playing games. Is okay, did that work well because of the dynamic at the table? Did the game create that dynamic at the table? What would happen if people behaved differently, or those kind of questions. Um, so do your playtesting, get the thing written, and get it finished, and then get it out of the door. Um, I think if you've got a really good game, then the barrier to launching it is not that high these days. Publish something straightforward and simple, put it on itch or drive through or wherever you want, and tell people about it and try and get them to play it. And if people like it, then you can do a Kickstarter and make a super deluxe version with all the bells and whistles. But just kind of getting something out there the first time, I think, is an important step. Having a product you can point to and say, I did that and I'm proud of it, is important.
Hmm. And so would you mention as well as like the default, because when you put this out, you didn't put it out as a Kickstarter originally. This went straight to Drive Through RPG, and then
Yeah, so I was in a privileged position. I was also pressed for time. So the privilege was I had enough money that I didn't need to do a Kickstarter to produce the book.
Hmm.
And I decided that, I could either spend this time doing the book, or I could spend this time doing a Kickstarter. And then when am I going to spend the time doing the book? So,
Right.
um, so I decided to self-fund, did the thing. In some ways, I viewed it as kind of this is training. If I end up going back to my job, I'll have learned a whole bunch of useful stuff.
Hmm.
As it turned out, this was the reason I ended up not staying back at my job all that long.
So in a way, you're also you're an example of why you shouldn't have sabbaticals for your employees, because they might end up.
Well, they've had 10 good years out of me up to that point.
There you go. That's true. Yeah.
No, I think, what else would I say? Hustle, lots of hustle. Do spend the time on the social media groups, talking about your game, telling people why it's good, putting the time in. Do contact lots of podcasts and journalists and people, and most of them will ignore you, but some of them won't. So do the hard yards of that kind of stuff. And from my fairly limited experience of launching one game, I would say it's quite important not to stop talking about it.
Mm.
So lots of designers who've been going for about as long as me are onto their fourth, fifth, sixth game. And they have maybe 4 or 5 games that haven't really gone anywhere. And it's kind of, well, if you put all that time and effort into one of them, maybe you'd be further on. I don't know.
Right.
But I think there is a tendency to kind of go, right, I've done my game, it's out on.
Right.
Rather than let's try and build something up around playing this game and keeping it in circulation. There was a sort of fairly breathtaking moment when I kind of did some calculations and sort of went, right, based on how many copies I've sold and how many I sell a month, and if I think the average book gets played this many times and the game takes this long, then at any given moment anywhere in the world someone's playing my game. It was kind of fairly mind-blowing. It's probably not true because most of my copies get sold in the US, and so I assume that when everyone in America is asleep, aside from maybe some parents dealing with particularly cranky children at 3 a.m. or something, there's probably not that many games happening then. But it was kind of interesting to realize.
Right. So that is a good question. Do you feel as though this is kind of westernized, or is there any updates that you're thinking of how to have this accessible to other parts of the world as well? Different languages, things like that?
Yeah, well, so far we have got translations in Polish, Italian, and Brazilian Portuguese.
Oh, wow.
And if anybody out there wants to produce a translation of Amazing Tales, get in touch. I'm open to good offers. So those are the languages that have been done, and I'm hoping there'll be more. And so far, it's basically been a case of translate the text, take the artwork, and put it out there. I deliberately made the artwork in the book, really quite diverse. So I like, anyone who plays Amazing Tales should be able to pick it up and see someone who looks a bit like them. It's kind of, or like they would like to look, because the game is for kids, but I tried to avoid having the player characters presented as children. I don't think kids, when they imagine having adventures as other people, naturally assume that they're going to be kids. I think they assume they're going to be kind of somewhat grown up hero types, I think. But yeah, so the artwork's diverse. So in terms of localizing it for other cultures, there might be places where you would want to redo some more of the artwork, just places where, a notion of a knight in armor maybe wouldn't make so much sense looking the way they do, or pirates would look very different. So I remember when I was working for Greenpeace, and we had an expedition with one of our ships up in the Arctic, and we had some Chinese journalists on board, and their company produced a website to support their journalists being on board and talk about what was happening in the Arctic. And as the little icon on the website to show where the ship was, there was a drawing of a Chinese junk. And, we looked at our icebreaker and we looked at this kind of icon of a Chinese junk and we went, oh, that wasn't what we were expecting. But yeah, if you're Chinese and your sort of stereotypical boat was maybe something that looks like that, rather than kind of the sort of steamship that we might have drawn. So it might be that there's a point where the culture is sufficiently different that you would want to redo the artwork. But yeah, I don't know. You want to test and talk about with.
So as we said, you have this book came out, and now that you are, and there's also some supplement books that people can get now from DriveThruRPG right now. Do you want to talk quickly about some of those other supplement books that you have?
Yeah, so there's 3 sort of mini campaigns that are out now. There's a 4th one coming. So those are The Quest for the Dragon Crown, The Cryptid Conundrum, and Captain Cadaver's Treasure. And the 4th one will be called A Dream of Trees. And those, in the book, there are 4 settings presented, and then each one of these campaigns fits with each setting. So Captain Cadaver's Treasure is the pirate adventure that goes with the pirate setting, and so on. And what you get in those is you get a pre-written adventure. So the book is packed with advice about how to make up your own adventure with your kid and have it be entirely your thing. I did discover that people wanted, a bit more framework, and people were like, can you provide us with a pre-written adventure? So, well, okay, here you go. And with these, I've set myself the target of kind of, if you've got a pre-written adventure, you've got the chance to maybe aim a bit higher to try and build some really big dramatic peaks in and do some clever stuff. So I tried to do that with all the different games. And if there are any children watching who are planning on playing the Quest for the Dragon Crown, close your ears now. But at the end of the Quest for the Dragon Crown, you find the Dragon Crown. What does it do? It's a magical thing that turns you into a dragon. So for the end of the game, your character has the option to turn into a dragon. And the system, it turns out, is so simple that if your character's a dragon, it works exactly the same way as when your character is not a dragon. Handles it really nicely. But yeah, I've heard that kids really, really get super excited at the moment when that happens. That you've gone through all these quests, you've found this magical item, you've had to deal with all this stuff, you get it, and then what does the amazing thing it does? Okay, it turns you into a dragon, and then you get to go off and fight the big bad dragon, and his dragon army, but your dragon. So that's just dragon-tastic, frankly. So that's the kind of thing you can aim for if you're writing these. And then the Cryptid Conundrum is for kids who are a little bit older, but I packed it full of codes and code wheels, and so you can hang on. Let's see if you can see this. So this is a cryptid encryption device which you can use to crack the codes which they have left behind for some fiendish reason, and work out what they're up to. And so it's templates to print them out and make them and that kind of stuff.
Right. Okay. That's pretty cool. Yeah. One of a parent asked you about, I don't want conflict in the game. How do you, do you want to talk to us about how you created Rescue City in response to that?
Yeah. So they didn't want violence. And yeah, we talked about this earlier. This is quite an important distinction. So
yeah,
they said, how do I have a non-violent game?
Right.
And I thought about it, and I sent them a slightly flippant response in good humor, which was, well, just don't put any in. And then I thought, well, okay, but if you don't put violence in, what goes there instead? And this, I think, is a question that role-playing games in general have been bad at answering. So many role-playing games basically boil down to, and now we have a fight. And you could even suggest that most adventures basically just boil down to working out who you're supposed to be fighting and when and why, and then you do it, which is maybe not ideal given the huge array of stories we could be telling. So I had to think about other kinds of conflict, and there's some blog posts on the website about this. And Rescue City came out of that. So Rescue City is a game, or is a setting where you can have thrilling adventures that don't actually involve violence. So the idea is that your characters would be members of the emergency services. So you might be a police officer, you might be a firefighter, you might be a doctor or a surgeon or an ambulance driver, or maybe a member of the Coast Guard, I don't know. And then, stuff happens, and it could be, as simple as a cat stuck up in a tree. That's quite exciting sometimes if you're 4, but it could also be, there's an earthquake and all these different things are going on in the city and you have to keep people safe and deal with them. Or it could be, as the picture on the cover shows, a skydiver has got themselves stuck on top of a statue on top of a skyscraper, and now you have to go and rescue them. That's an exciting story to tell, and there's plenty you can do with that, and nobody has to have a fight. So
And to be clear, you could easily be playing a giant robotic dinosaur with 4 arms
saving
on the rescue
people.
Squad.
Yeah, on the rescue squad, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't that the premise of some kind of kids version of Transformers at one point? It
I
was
think
like
so.
kind of a junior version of Transformers where they hung out at the fire station and rescued people. Yeah.
Yeah, like rescue
There you go.
bots or something. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Do that.
Yeah.
There's no reason not to.
And also too, how many of have you heard of anything coming out from any of the blog posts or people have sent you emails by saying, because of this story, I was able to write a children's book, or I was able to do this, or I was able to create something based off of adventures that they were a part of with their children?
No. That'd be good though. If anybody's done that, write, tell me about it, and then we'll talk about my percentage.
So Martin, you have a couple projects in the works. Do you want to talk
Yeah.
to us a little bit about those?
Yeah, so there's two things going on at the moment. One is, so once this fourth campaign for Amazing Tales is out, then I will be consolidating them all and turning them into another hardback book. And that was a project which was called The Big Book of Amazing Tales. It was a Kickstarter, and the backers can look forward to getting everything they backed in the next, I don't know, couple of months or so. Certainly the last adventure should be done in the next couple of weeks. So that will be done very soon, and then it's available for everyone. And as well as the adventures in there, rescue cities in there, there's also an article about using Amazing Tales for therapeutic purposes, and there's an article about using Amazing Tales in the classroom. And because I'm not a therapist or a teacher, I found a therapist and a teacher to write those for me. So that's all going in the big book. And then the next thing I'm working on at the moment is called Amazing Heroes. And this is two things. It's the superhero setting for Amazing Tales, which lots of people have asked for. And it's also a bunch of slightly more advanced rules. So my sort of design ambition is that if you were to play this for a couple of hours, you should probably get through as much story as you would get if you sat down and watched an episode of The Flash or something like that, or The Arrow or whatever. So it's kind of pitched at that kind of superhero, and it's pitched at kind of that intensity of storytelling. You should be able to get through a lot in an evening of a couple of hours play. So that's the Amazing Heroes project, and Amazing Heroes will include all the things that people tell me are missing in Amazing Tales. So which I think of as the consequences. So if you go on adventures and learn things, you will gain experience, and your character will become better and more amazing. And so there'll be an experience system. There will also be rules for bad stuff happening to you that might be persistent. So getting hurt, getting injured, possibly even getting killed. So those will be options in the game, along with advice about how to manage them. One thing I've realized writing this, I've been trying to keep the rules component of all of this as short as possible. Amazing Tales has super simple rules, and I think that's why it works. But one of the things I'm trying to do is to support the rules that there are with lots and lots of Games Master advice, because I think my approach to this is that Games Masters are amazing things. They have human brains, which are quite fantastic storytelling machines, and you should try and sort of set those loose to do their best rather than hedge them in with rules and stuff. So that's kind of some of the thinking going on into Amazing Heroes, and I'm hoping I might have a Kickstarter out for that before the end of the year. We'll have to see how it goes.
That's awesome. So how does that? So just real quick, have you kind of defined how the superhero system works? Is there like a second column of skills that are here, like superpowers, and then there's also your other skills?
Yeah, this is one of the things I'm sort of testing at the moment, is how different do you want to make that? So I have done, one of my playtesters went, yes, you've written a big list of superpowers like everyone else has. It's true. And I don't know, I'm not feeling very satisfied with this kind of giving people a list of things your hero can be super at. I think the kind of make up your own is probably the way to go. But then I do want this game to be more playable by adults, and that maybe demands a little bit more sort of consistency and verisimilitude, things like that. So just trying to work out how people would scale their powers. So, if you've got a D6 in telekinesis, all right, what does that actually mean compared to someone who's got a D12? And how are we going to handle things like player versus player? Because in the superhero genre, that happens all the time. They're constantly getting their minds taken over and having fights with the other members of their team and that kind of stuff. So I need to think about how that's going to work. But yeah, so superpowers will work a lot like regular skills, but possibly in a way that lets them kind of develop some depth as you build them up and learn more about them. So I really like that when you watch The Flash, first Barry can just run really fast. And then he learns to do new things with his powers. So he learns to make, vortexes by waving his arms really fast. And he learns to phase through things, and he learns to throw lightning, and he learns to do a supersonic punch. And I like the idea of superhero characters kind of starting with a really basic power and then building on it as they go and discovering new stuff about themselves. So I want to have an element of that in there.
Huh. Well, that sounds really exciting. So are you utilizing your same playtest group you did when you started this one? Because as your kids are getting older, you can start utilizing for more games.
Yeah. So Lisa and Ruben have been doing some playtesting, but now the regular grown-up game or one of the regular games with grown-ups that I play in, my Thursday night crew have been signed up to be the guinea pigs for the grown-up playtest. So right now we're sort of trying out some of these questions you've been asking about the system, but we're also having a run around the setting, which is a lot more fleshed out than traditional Amazing Tales settings have been. So just to give people an idea, I think the whole of Amazing Tales clocks in at 12,000 words, and the superhero supplement is now around 14 or 15,000 words already. So it's going to be much more like a traditional role-playing game source book. So it should be able to do double duty also for people who want to have their game of Marvel superheroes in a different city or something like that.
And do you have also you're going to be pulling in the same, trying to get your same illustrators back for this as well?
There'll definitely be some of them, although I've been thinking about how to do it and whether I might want to work with someone who's done sort of superhero comic type illustration and that kind of thing. So I'm having a little bit of a think about the art direction for this one. So far, everything's been very consistent, but I'm also wondering if I want to kind of give this a full-on superhero treatment or something like that. So we shall see. It might all be down to how well the Kickstarter does anyway.
That's great. And I gotta say too, Martin, you have, compared to other folks, you've got a really loyal fan base that you've worked with over the years as well, that you've got involved with, and I think you have a very active and a very supportive fan base. So, and I think it shows, is like you were saying, it's good to just, stay active in your products.
Yeah, stay active, keep talking to people. On my list of things to do this year was go to lots of role-playing conventions. Obvious reasons that's not happened, but as soon as the conventions are back, I will at least be at European ones. I will try and get over to the States. And I'm really looking forward to meeting some people who've played my games. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to the first time I kind of meet someone who's sort of 18 or 20 or something who says, yeah, I've been playing role-playing games for 14 years thanks to you. I think that'll be pretty interesting.
Yeah. And they also can probably go out there and if they do that, they should, making sure as well that they're out there and that they actually, let me just pull this up here. What I was really impressed when I was going to your website is that you actually have coffee cups, which I think is fantastic.
So this You go, listen to your audience. So some people said, can we get posters? Can we get T-shirts? Can we get stuff? So this is my Redbubble website, where you can get all kinds of Amazing Tales merchandise now. I have to say this has not been an enormous merchandising success.
The coffee cups.
No, although it's not here. I quite like it. And
I love talking to like looking at what the merchandising, because I do love the fact that you have all these posters, basically all this artwork that people can come in for purchase.
Yeah, like I say, it's very, very easy to set up. You put the artwork up there, and then they turn it into everything. So I haven't ticked the boxes, but if you wanted an Amazing Tales bedspread or an Amazing Tales shower curtain, Amazing Tales mini skirt, Amazing Tales school bag, this is all possible. So if you see some Redbubble product and you think, oh, I would really like that, but with some Amazing Tales artwork on it, send me a note. It can be arranged.
You just click a button and then
you just click a button and they add it. So, but for now, I think I've basically just done posters. You can get some notebooks, which I think look great, and the mug. That's
postcards.
I thought I'd start simple.
Yeah. I love the art. I might have to get one of those coffee mugs. Ever since, this is the thing. It's like ever since I've been working from home, being on Zoom calls all the time, I can't show off different ties I wear, but I can show off different coffee mugs I'm drinking from.
There
so
you go.
I'll have to get that.
If you get that, you will have, I think, the second one.
Yeah. This is great. So Martin, looking forward to your upcoming Kickstarter, looking forward to seeing like your big book of Amazing Tales when that's out. And so where can people find you?
So let's see. I'm amazing-tales.net is the website, and everything is linked from there. But also facebook.com/talesamazing. We had to do it backwards because somebody else got there first. I'm on Twitter as Mr. Lloyd GP. I think that kind of covers it. Oh, I'm on Instagram. I should probably know what the account name is, but I don't. There are links. It's fine. Google Martin Lloyd Amazing Tales. It'll all work.
It'll be there.
Yeah. If you want to get hold of me, send me an email. Or DM me on Twitter. Those are the best ways.
The best ways. Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Martin. And I'll look forward to when you're putting out your new Kickstarter for your superheroes. Let us know. We'd love to talk to you about it. Yeah,
I will. This has been fun. And,
all right.
Yeah.
So are you, so I got to ask you, being these kind of things, is it deliberate to set up like those board games behind you?
No, kind of like
this pick and choose.
No, I probably should. This is just the mess that is my office. It's the board game overflow pile.
Without naming names, is there any board games where you play and you're like, I am never playing this again?
Oh, Monopoly, but